Good morning, students. Yesterday we have started landlords and tenants under the British and the Nizam rule. So Britishers introduced two systems. One is Jamindari system and another one is the Raitwari system. So in these two systems, the taxes are more high. So the Jamindars or Jagirdars were exploited the farmers. Okay, so how Jamindars exploit the peasants we will discuss in this lesson. Okay, the Jamindars exploitation of the peasants. So already you know they collected more taxes from the farmers and they had given lands on rent to the peasants with high rent. Okay, so during the colonial period, in addition to this, during the colonial period, the peasants were forced to do vetti on the personal land of the landlords. So forcibly, the farmer should do vetti. Vetti means the farmers or peasants should work in the personal lands of the landlords or in their homes without taking any wages. Without taking any wages or with small remuneration. So that is called vetti. So if they refused to work in their personal lands, they used soldiers to catch the peasants on the road and force them to do vetti in the Jamindars' fields. So forcibly they used the soldiers also to make the farmers to do vetti in the Jamindars' fields. Okay, so in these conditions, many peasants could not cultivate their own fields properly. Why? Because they have to work in their own field, and in addition to that, they have to do vetti in the Jamindars' fields. That's why they are unable to cultivate their own fields and they are unable to improve their fields. Okay, so these conditions understood through a government report written in 1878. The report says that the peasants did not try to dig well in their lands or irrigate it, nor did they try to bound their fields or dig drains or use fertilizers. Why? If they improve those lands, so those lands were taken from landlords or Jamindars on rent. If they start cultivating, if they dig well, if they develop the lands, immediately they will evict it, and those lands were given to other people on higher rent. So that's why who are taken lands from the landlords were unable to improve the lands. So they have some fears. They do nothing to improve their land because they fear they can be evicted from their land at any time. There is no long period agreement between Jamindars and peasants. If they improve their farming, the Jamindars immediately increase their share he takes from them. So another problem is if they get more yield, so immediately Jamindar will increase the rent. Next, but the Jamindars also prevent the peasants from improving their fields because they are afraid that the peasants would then start asserting their rights over the land. In another side, Jamindars also having some fear if the peasants improve their lands. So later they will demand. Okay, they will start asserting their rights over the land. Because of all these conditions, the peasants are unable to improve the land. Okay, they are unable to cultivate their lands. Next, countless collections, cesses and payments. So already you know Jamindars were collected higher taxes from the peasants and they collected different taxes from the peasants. So the peasants also had to regularly supply ghee, milk, vegetables, jaggery, straw, cow dung cakes, etc. free of cost to the Jamindar's house. So in addition to paying taxes, rents, they have to supply these all ghee, milk, vegetables, jaggery, straw, cow dung cakes should be supplied to Jamindars without money. So this situation was there in many provinces of India, especially Bengal, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh had many powerful Jamindars. So already we discussed in the previous class. In Deccan, no that much powerful Jamindars like northern states. Okay, next. Each of them owned dozens of, even hundreds of villages under their rule. These Jamindars are having dozens or hundreds of villages under their control. So the peasants also keep trying to resist or revolt against the Jamindars. Doras and peasants of Hyderabad. So in our state, in the Hyderabad state under the Nizam rule, so at the time of Britishers, so Rayalaseema, Telangana and Andhra areas and some part of the Karnataka were under the Nizam rule. So Nizam ruled under the Britishers. So under the Nizam, some subordinates also there. There were many forms of subordinate chieftaincies like Jagirdars, Samsthanamdars and Imandars who ruled like independent chiefs. So total Telangana, Andhra and Rayalaseema area was not ruled by Nizam. So he was ruled with the help of other people like Jagirdars, Samantandars and Imandars. Okay, they collected revenue from the peasants and they paid part of the taxes to the Nizam as peshkash. So they paid to Nizams as peshkash. They collected more, but they paid very little to the Nizam. They kept remaining with them. Okay, so they have so many powers. They are responsible for the administration of these areas. In the Hyderabad state, there were about 1500 jagirs spread over 6535 villages. So 1500 jagirdars controlled 6535 villages and 14 samsthanamdars controlled 497 villages. Okay, about 1400 villages were directly under the rule of Nizam. So those are Nizam's personal jagir. Those are called Sarf-e-Khas. 1400 villages were directly ruled by Nizams. Those are called Sarf-e-Khas. Except 1400, remaining all the villages were ruled by Jamindars or Samsthanams. Okay, next. The Nizams who ruled Hyderabad state were under the British and they should follow the British policies. So in the first half of the 19th century, they tried to collect maximum land revenue through Deshmukhs. In the beginning of the 19th century, the Nizams collected taxes with the help of Deshmukhs. Later, they changed their policy and they appointed district officials to collect the taxes. So those were under the Nizams. Okay, so the old landlords who are acted Jamindars, Samsthanamdars previously were lost their income. So to compensate that, the government had paid some compensation called rusum, and those were also given patta rights of full ownership over the land and the adjoining wastelands and forests. So they removed Jamindars to collect the taxes. So that's why Jamindars and Samsthanamdars lost their income. So to compensate that, the government had given some resume payment to them, annual payment to them, and they issued patta rights on their own lands and adjoining wastelands and forests. So at the time, the price of the castor groundnut was more. So to produce more these crops, the Jamindars brought more wastelands under cultivation, and they used laborers to work in their own lands as vetti. So the large landlords were called Doras in our Telangana state. The large landlords were called Doras. The Dora lived in a large fortified houses called Gadi. Okay, those Gadis were protected by soldiers and servants and some peasants. They had wastelands cultivated by tenants and also lands directly cultivated with forced labor. That is called Kudkust. Okay, they acted as village money lenders too. Why? Because they have more money. They collected taxes from the farmers. That's why they can acted as money lenders. So they also have some judicial powers over the entire villages. So they settled disputes between the villagers. Okay, they usually partial towards the upper caste. Even other village officials like Patwari, Karanam, okay, small landlords and soldiers also obey the orders of the Doras. So they forcibly ensured that the lower caste laborers, especially SC/ST people, should work in the houses of the upper caste, especially in houses of landlords. They enforced rules like no lower caste person could wear shirts or slippers or wear a turban, and had to always remain bent before the Doras and address them as their masters. So if any person won't follow this, they will be punished. So they enforced rules like no lower caste, especially SC/ST people should not wear shirts or slippers for their boots or wear turban, and had to always remain bent before the Doras, and they address them as their masters or Doras. Okay, next. In Mahabubnagar and Nalgonda districts, there were 550 Doras were owned more than thousands of acres of land. So how many Doras were there? 550. So everyone is having more than thousands of acres. Okay, so some other Doras like Visnuri Ramchandra Reddy and Janna Reddy Pratap Reddy was having more than 1 lakh of acres. Okay, so famines means so drought conditions. Okay, so famines are massive food shortages leading to acute distress were a regular feature of the British rule. So at the time of British rule, so farmers faced so many famines, and food shortages. So why? Because they collected more taxes from the public. That's why they had a little reserves to face difficult situations or crop failures. So most of the share they paid as taxes. That's why they left very little income. So that's why they are unable to face the problems. Further, food grains were exported out of the country in large quantities. So from our India, so most food grains were exported to European countries. Forest products exported to European countries, and cotton exported to European countries. So because of exports, they faced the food scarcity. This created scarcity situation in the entire country. So in addition to this, government often refused to interfere when powerful traders tried to create artificial scarcity by hoarding food grains. So sometimes what traders will do, they will purchase food products from the farmers and they store somewhere. They don't sell. Like this, they will create the scarcity. Then prices will be increased. Then they will get more profits. Okay, like that, farmers faced so many problems. So in Telangana, Andhra and Rayalaseema, and like the rest of the country, suffered from severe famines in the 19th and 20th centuries. The most severe famine, commonly known as the Ganjam famine, occurred during the years 1865 to 66. So in that Ganjam famine, so many were died. Thousands of people were died because of hunger. Okay. Next, repeated famines occurred in the Rayalaseema district due to lack of irrigation facilities. There is no water. There were no dams. So most of the Rayalaseema depend on rainfall. So they faced so many famines. Not less than 11 famines occurred during the last half of the 19th century. Thousands of people died. Grain riots occurred in many Andhra districts and troops were sent to quell the violence. To suppress this riot, so troops and the soldiers were sent. So riot means loot the shops. They started looting the shops. Next, the peasant movements. So to overcome these problems, the peasants started agitations against the Jamindari system and landlordism and against the money lenders. So we saw above that the peasants were deeply troubled by high land revenue rates, oppression of the landlords and money lenders. So during the colonial period, colonial means our country was colonized by the Britishers, occupied by the Britishers, administered by the Britishers. That is the meaning of colonial country. So colonial period, the peasants and different parts of the country protested and fought against the landlords, merchants and state officials. So why? They collected more taxes and they imposed different rules and regulations on the peasants. So the famous peasants movements were the Deccan riots of 1860s, Rampa Pituris. So one of the hesitation or fought against the Jamindar system, Rampa Pituris, and Moppila agitations which had taken organized forms. Next, while in the 19th century, the movements took the form of open revolts, the peasants joined the national movement in large number in the 20th century under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. So at the time only Mahatma Gandhi came to India and he traveled throughout the India to understand the problems of the peasants. Okay, in 1920-22, the peasants of Awadh in Uttar Pradesh took out huge procession to protest against the Jamindars who were extracting money from them. Many Jamindars were socially boycotted. What is the meaning of socially boycotted? So the peasants were not ready to work in the homes of the Jamindars, in the fields of the Jamindars. They never helped to the Jamindars. So like that, the Jamindars were boycotted socially and driven from the villages. They went off from the villages. The peasants also refused to till the fields of the Jamindars, who tried to evict their tenants or claim too much rent from them. So previously, the peasants who are suffered because of eviction or because of high rents. So now those who are not ready to work or not ready to till the fields of the Jamindars. The peasants formed Kisan Sabha. Kisan means farmer. They formed Kisan Sabhas to carry their agitation forward and demanded abolition of landlordism, reduction of land revenue, and control over money lenders. So through Kisan Sabhas, so they demanded. What are the demands of the farmers? One is abolition of landlordism. So we have to take over the lands from the landlords. Those should be redistributed to the farmers. That is the meaning of abolition of landlordism and reduction of land revenue. The taxes should be reduced and control over money lenders. So at the time, farmers depend on money lenders for loans. So now they demanded control over money lenders. So the British government helped the Jamindars to suppress the revolts. So the Britishers and Nizam and Jamindars are same. So those were the government at the time. British government helped the Jamindars to suppress those revolts against the Jamindars. So what they thought that if they allow revolt against the Jamindars, later the peasants or people may revolt against the Britishers also. That's why, because of that fear, they supported Jamindars to suppress the revolts. So we can read about the revolts and agitations more in the next classes. Okay. With this, lesson is completed. So write your own notes and send to me. Thank you.